I got 99 problems. Hi, I'm Nikki, the obsessive bookseller. Welcome to my channel. Today, I'm going to talk about my top 10 bookish problems. If you've been with me a while, you know that I spend a great deal of my time thinking about reading strategies, probably more so than I do actually reading. And I got a lot of opinions. In fact, a lot of my bookish problems on my list today have been explored in more depth in my Reading Rambles series, so I'll link that playlist below. But see, this is why I love being a part of a bookish community, because these are very much first world problems, but yet y'all can relate. Y'all understand where I'm coming from. So let's dive in. Number 1, there are too many books that I want to be reading right now. This is different from having too big of a TBR because I actually feel like my TBR is a reasonable size. Check out this video. Now my problem is I get to planning way too far ahead, and what that instantly does is make me unsatisfied with what I'm reading right now because I'm antsy to get to all the books that I have on the docket. It's this constant balance that I've been trying to strike between planning out fun buddy reads and book club picks and still feeling really involved in the book that I'm reading at the moment. But like there comes a point in every single book that I'm reading lately where I hit like the 75% mark, and then I find myself trying to rush to the end of the book and being kind of bored with what's going on because I am chasing the novelty of picking up the next thing on my list. It is not a good thing. It is such a dysfunctional relationship with reading because like even if the end of the book is good, I'm still feeling antsy to get to the next thing. And my natural tendency is to just pick up multiple books at a time, and then I get myself into such a mess where it takes me months and months to dig myself out of this. And I'm still not sure what the solution is with this, but at least I know what the problem is. I am too excited to get to the next books on my list, and maybe I need to stop planning so much. It would be great if I could solve all the problems on my list today. Number 2, collector woes. I'm a book collector, and I am very anal about what I bring into my library. In fact, a lot of my used book hunting has been trying to find the right formats and editions because y'all know how much I freaking hate the book club editions, the smaller ones. I want everything to be a standard publication size. But like with the whole Grace of Kings debacle where the publisher, like you do everything right and you buy all the formats you're supposed to, and then the publisher screws it up. Oh, there are so many books on my shelves where the publishing decisions on how to format the spines are just like, what were they thinking? This does not match. Do they not like sit all the books and line them up together so they can make sure that it's cohesive? It drives me absolutely crazy. And then don't even get me started on when they find a different cover artist after working with the same one for the entire series. Like, I understand it's a business and I understand why these things happen, but it drives me crazy because even if I strive for perfection, it's out of my hands. I can never quite get there. They make it very difficult for me to curate my collection sometimes. And I think if you have a book that's only published in paperback and then you publish subsequent books in the series in hardcover, you need to go back and republish those first couple books in hardcover. Please. My Alona Andrews section has that problem. My Robin Hobbs section has that problem. And I find it maddening. And actually, ironically, this is the one place where book club editions come in handy because everything from the science fiction book club is in hardcover, even if it's only published traditionally in mass market or trade. So I am nothing if not contrary. Number 3, BookTube is not helping my reading life. Break down my day by hours spent on each thing, and you will note that I spend way more time watching BookTube than I do actually reading. This is an awesome place to be, but oh my gosh, I cannot put my phone down and stop watching people talking about books long enough to actually read them. And what's more, like I mentioned, I want to be reading all the books right now. This perpetuates that because I see all the books people are reading, and that FOMO, that anxiety that I'm not getting through things fast enough comes up. And so BookTube, in a sense, is making all of my problems worse. And yet, I love being a part of the community, and I love watching other people's videos and seeing what they say about the books that I want to read or have read. But every time I do, I feel that twinge in the back of my head like, oh, you should be reading that right now. Oh, you've been meaning to get to that book for ages. You should plan it in and then overwhelm yourself with too much on your schedule. Definitely a first world problem. Now, I have managed to limit other distractions. I don't spend quite as much time online. And in fact, I've cut out Facebook and Twitter, and I'm not even on TikTok because it's a very unhealthy place. But I find myself constantly on Goodreads. So my social media addiction is more books. At least I'm consistent. Number 4, I have too many reading challenges. I have said this before, but I think reading and planning reading are 2 different hobbies for me. I love creating reading challenges and projects. Like I've got Project YA going, I've got my incomplete series, Overflowing Bookshelf Challenge, Project Urban Fantasy, Project Sci-Fi. I'm forgetting a couple. But like a month or 2 ago, I saw a really cool Excel sheet reading schedule on Matt's channel, which I'll link. And I thought, oh, that is so cool. I love the idea of planning out my reading and figuring out what I can actually get through because I'm always way too optimistic. I'm like, oh, I can finish 10 books this month. No problem, I just gotta read a little faster. That never happens. But anyway, I had fun for a couple of days, like planning out my reading from the beginning of October all the way to like February or March. And it became clear really quickly that I do not have enough time, literally do not have enough time, based on my current reading speeds, even if I were to speed things up by like 25%, which is not gonna happen, to get through all of my projects that I want to do. And so, yeah, I have too many projects going. There's no way I can have time to focus on all of them to my satisfaction. And so does that mean that I need to cut out some projects and challenges? Probably. But I can't figure out which one I want to get rid of, so I'm just going to perpetually be behind on everything and not doing everything completely. I actually think I have come up with a little bit of a solution to this. I think instead of just having like an ongoing projects that I'm working at here and there and having like tons of vlogging footage just taking up space on my camera that I can't get to until I finish the projects, and it just gets so complicated to fish through it all. My solution is I think I'm going to just go by a whim and say, okay, this week I'm in the mood for sci-fi, so I'm going to devote the entire week to just sci-fi books. I think I'm going to do it that way. So that one I may have a little bit of a solution from, but yet again, here we are, strategizing instead of actually reading. Number 5, too many series going at once. I have so many outstanding series. I know I'm not alone, but I know the math. It's like simple math. If you want to finish more series than you start, it's basic math. Stop starting so many series. But for some reason I can't seem to wrap my head around that. Like, oh, well, if I have plans to start like 4 series this month, no, I can just get by like finishing only 1 or 2. It's gonna be fine. Like, it's gonna be fine. I'll get to all of it next month and it'll be fine. It's never fine. I always have way too many going at once. The problem with this is that by the time I get back around to completing the series that I've started, I've lost the momentum. I forget characters. I have to do a lot of rereading. And it's basic, and I feel less invested. My ratings for books that I've waited too long to get back to, or series rather, are always lower than had I just continued right away. But there's a fine line, because if you continue too fast, then you risk burnout on that series. And so I do need to jump around a little bit, but maybe not quite like, 2 or 3 years between books type of jumping around. This is yet another problem I don't know the solution to. I do know that I don't want to spend my entire life reading incomplete series because the novelty of starting new things is something that kind of drives me as a reader. But that being said, I did the math with that schedule, and to wrap up everything I have outstanding, not counting Malazan, it would take me about 6 months of exclusively incomplete series reading. So what I'm doing instead is picking 1 a month to kind of focus a little more on. So I'll still be reading other things and starting series, finishing series, but then I'll be like, okay, this one has been on my list for a really long time and there's only 1 book left to finish things out. I'm going to pick that one. That's been helpful and actually kind of fun because I still feel like I'm making progress, but my habits have basically not changed. But what that does also is help me prioritize, because not every series that I start is good enough to warrant finishing right now. And I do recognize that there's like a natural tendency to drift more towards the series that are working for you as opposed to the ones that are just meh, because the meh ones will always be there. I digress. Number 6, I suck at keeping up on reviews. This has always been the one aspect of all of the content creation that I've struggled with the most. This is the one that feels like a chore because I either wait too long to write the review and so the stuff isn't fresh in my mind anymore, or I try to write it too quickly and then sit on it for a couple days and realize my opinion has changed. Like, I can think of so many books where I finished it, wrote the review immediately, and then sat on it, and I'm like, no, actually, I really didn't like that one as much as I thought I did. But you can't go back and change it, because who has time, first of all? This has been my biggest focus for the last couple of months, is to get more on top of writing reviews, getting in the habit of working on review writing, or at the very least, post-creation. Someone gave me great writing advice. I think he got it from David Foster Wallace, where if you can't write, you can work. So on the days where I feel like I cannot bring myself to write a review, well, I can set up the template for the book review itself and go with that. I can populate things, I can put tags on it, whatever. I've been trying to use the productivity hack of just setting a 5-minute timer. If I don't feel like I have it in me to write an entire review, work on it for 5 minutes and then call it a day. And what usually happens is you get into a flow, a writing state flow, and you can sustain it until the end of the review. But there are days where I write a paragraph and I'm like, that's good. Another problem here is that I finish books so often, couple books a week. So it's very difficult to stay on top of that. And then I get a backlog of unwritten reviews, and I'm such a perfectionist that I'm like, I need to have written a review for all of those things. But it's been so far gone that the idea of dredging up enough mental capacity to write a review for a book that I read at the beginning of the year, it just takes so much effort. But reviews are like my bread and butter. I have built a community on Goodreads for writing reviews and giving feedback on titles, and there have been times where months have gone by where I haven't published a single review, and it's a problem. This is where BookTube has helped, because I like to have the written review done before I do the filming of the book reviews that I do on here. But if you'll notice, a lot of the book reviews that I actually take time to review are obligation reads where it kind of forces me to write the review. All of that said, I'm doing a much better job. I'm getting into the habit of spending at least a couple minutes a day on review writing and trying to review a book in a series before I pick up the next one. Because if I'm reading a series pretty back to back, if I don't write the review before I start the next book, then I will not remember what I needed to talk about in that first book because I've already moved on to the next one. But I have spent months and months not starting a next book in a series because I'm waiting on myself to write the review for the first one. So get into this weird feedback loop of problems. I don't think I sufficiently warned you at the beginning of this video on how in-depth all of these I was gonna go. I have a loose goal of trying to write reviews for every single book that I read this year, but at the very least, when I started hitting review writing hard, as long as I have reviewed everything that I've read since I made that commitment, I'm good. And I have stuck with that. The problem is I have a backlog of 10 written reviews that haven't posted, and I'm like, I should just go and post them all in one day. But I'm like, no, that's not how content creation works. You've got to trickle it out and keep them interested. So yeah. Number 7, I cannot find a reading strategy that I like. I wrote my problems list a couple of months ago because I knew I wanted to do a post like this, and so I just started jotting down problems that arose throughout my day. And it is only recently, after having read Atomic Habits by James Clear, that I realized why I may not be able to find a strategy that I like for reading. Because you see me, I come up with new reading strategies constantly. I'm constantly thinking of ways to approach things to improve my reading life. And I don't think that's a bad tendency necessarily, but I think what Atomic Habits taught me was that I do not believe I am actually striving to perfect things. I think I am addicted to the novelty of trying new things. And so I will get all excited about a new reading strategy, plan it out completely, hop on board for about a week or two, and then explain it to my audience and share, this is the cool thing I'm trying this week, and then get bored with it and move on. And James Clear was saying something to the effect of, it's not the lack of commitment or ability that knocks people off of continuing with good habits that are actually serving them. It's the lack of novelty. It's boredom. So you get too complacent with the things that you're doing and you seek the novelty of a new system even though the one you have is working really well for you. And so I don't give any of these reading strategies long enough to stick. I mean, I've kind of taken bits and pieces of different ones here and there and kind of applied them. So I'm kind of like a hodgepodge of strategies in one, trying to perfect my reading life. But yeah, I give them 2 weeks and then I get bored and I come up with the next ooh, amazing thing that I'm going to try. So I've got a lot of food for thought on this recently. And I think that if I come up with a reading strategy again, I need to give it a good go. I need to recognize that it's just lack of novelty and boredom that has me reaching for something else. And yeah, maybe sit with that for a little while and see if the strategy itself will actually serve me. I love stuff like this. Number 8, I bought way too many audiobooks. I need to do a challenge on this. I have over 500 in my collection, but I have like 250 to 300 of those are unread. And y'all know what happens, those Audible sales, the 2-for-1 credits, or the under $5 sales, where I will pick up an entire series of something because I know I would like to have it to read eventually. My children are yelling. I find myself willing to pick up entire series for a cheap, because it has served me so well in the past. When I was very first starting out on audio, I got the entire Dresden Files saga for like $60 and kind of worked my way through it gradually. And had I not had all of those books already in my library, I probably would have stopped reading at like book 3 or 4. But because I had them all, I'm like, okay, well, just pick up the next one. It's an easy read here. And so I have so many like that on there now. So many series, and then inevitably you get to the end of your year. Because I have so many books on there already, I don't spend a lot of credits, maybe for new releases that aren't available at the library. And so I get to the end of the year and my credits will expire if I don't use them. So I'm like, oh crap, what do I want to read? And so that's when I go through and buy a whole bunch more. What I need to do is cancel my membership until I get like more caught up with everything in there. Now, having a huge pool of audiobooks to choose from on any given day is actually kind of a cool thing. But the thing that stresses me out, the reason I feel such anxiety, is because if you read Audible's fine print, audiobooks are not available to you indefinitely, even if you spent cold hard cash on them. So, for example, I bought a book, random book, one that I knew I wanted to get to eventually. It was an Audible exclusive, and it vanished from my library because I took too long to get to it. And so I walk around with this underlying anxiety that the books that I bought that I want to read are just going to disappear out from under me. I'm really angry about that. I feel like if you paid for content, you should get the content. Now, don't make it available to other users to purchase from that point on, but don't delete shit from my library. Makes me furious. I've had 2 that I've been aware of that have just disappeared like that. I went through to listen to one and it's like, oh, sorry, this is not available anymore. I'm like, what do you mean it's not available? I paid $15 for this. Oh, don't get me started. Anyway, I think I need an audiobook challenge. I need to add one more thing to my long line of incomplete challenges because I want to focus more on the books that I paid cold hard cash for. It's so easy to forget that when you're spending a credit, you're spending the equivalent of $10 to $15 that you paid in one chunk in like August. So easy to forget that it's actually like money changing hands. So I have hundreds and hundreds of dollars of unread audiobooks that I need to, spend more time on. There's certainly not a shortage of cool things in there to read. And in fact, I made a Goodreads list of listing out all of the neat things that I'm sitting on. So I'll link that if you're interested. But yeah, one more challenge. Number 9, used book shopping is a pain in the butt. I have curated my collection to the point where I'm only hunting for a few specific titles here and there. Every now and then I'll read a new series where I'm like, oh, I need to go back and find all the hardcovers because I love that. But for the most part, I am just trying to fill in the gaps and replace kind of damaged used copies that I got with better versions. But the used book market online, where you can't actually touch the book or like look at dimensions or condition, makes me not want to order books anymore. So I hate the book club editions, but unfortunately they are identical with ISBN to the traditionally published standard size ones. So every time that I go in to order one of those where I know that a book club edition has been made, I will email the seller and say, hey, can you confirm that this is the correct size? And some of them can, but most of them are just like, well, that's what it says in the description, so yeah, it is. And then they send me the wrong one, and then I have to return it, and yet they sometimes don't even refund my shipping. But then I'm stuck with the book that I have to return, so I have to go through the process, and then I have to actually take it somewhere and drop it off. And everything about that just irritates me because not only have I spent 3 or 4 weeks waiting for that book to get there, but then I have to wait another 3 or 4 weeks to get a refund on it. Everything about this is against my whole like minimalistic practices of trying to simplify my life. And so I have found myself not ordering books recently. And there's nothing worse than when you pay premium for a book that's new and then you get it and it's very clearly not new. I'm like, that's acceptable at best, people. Like, a beat-up library edition is not new. Anyway, it's such a hassle, so I have to be in the mood when I'm trying to replace something in my collection or fill in the gaps. I have to be in the mood to kind of field everything. And I would say 1 out of every 3 books that I order, I actually end up keeping. And that is horrible. It takes so much effort. So when I do have the opportunity to go on one of my used bookstore treks, I really embrace it because I can like see what I'm bringing home. And that's probably why I end up with so many books, even if I'm not sure I'll want them eventually. Because I'm like, if I do want this, I'm going to have to go through so much hassle to get it that I might as well just pick it up now. Sunk costs, whatever. It's just money, right? We don't need it for food. Anyway, I hate buying used books online. Hate it. I've actually started the practice of any book that I think I might want to read or might be really into, new releases that year, I've started buying those. It's not something I've ever done in the past, but I'd rather spend $20 now on a hardcover than 50 on a mediocre one in like 2 years. And it's a trade-off, it's a risk. I'm basically paying for the peace of mind that I don't have to go through the hassle later, even though I may end up donating the book because I end up not liking it. It's a trade-off. But having all the new books that came out this year that I'm interested in reading all lined up on my shelf, like, that's very appealing. Some good comes out of it. Last but not least, I think I am turning into a grouchy reader. I feel like sometimes I'm just sitting back there with a cigarette like, I hate everything. It's particularly worse when I find myself reading a bunch of duds back to back. I feel like, oh, nothing's ever going to work for me again. And then I read something like a Joe Abercrombie and I'm like, oh, no, this is why I'm reading. In fact, that happened. I read a Joe Abercrombie at the beginning of the year after feeling kind of ennui about my reading life. I'm like, nothing's ever going to make me feel excited again. And then I read a Joe Abercrombie and it like reinvigorated my love for reading. So this one's very circumstantial, but I do know that I am a lot more picky with books now than I used to be. My standards have gone up like through the roof because I've read so many amazing titles. And books that I would have previously given like a 4 or 5 star to, I'm like, oh, that's a 2 star. That one's just okay. Because I think the more you read and review, the more you can kind of nuance where something aligns in that 5-star scale. Because you have more books to compare it to, more things that you've read that you're like, yeah, that was good, but it wasn't this good. Like, is it on Abercrombie level? No. Is it one step below that? Probably not. You know, what comes along with this is I'm also a lot quicker to DNF things when I'm not enjoying them. Because life is too short to read books you're not enjoying. And you may not have a chance to get through them all. So read the best books first. Those are my mantras. But there are days when I see a new booktuber, someone who's just getting into the fantasy genre, and they have that unbridled enthusiasm for everything they're reading. They are just so excited to be enmeshed in the genre. And I'm over here like pooing on a book that they gave 5 stars to. I'm like, well, there's so many things wrong with it. Like, I gotta nitpick everything. It does not help that I have a very over-analytical mind, and if given free rein, it would just pick everything apart. So that's how I know a book is truly amazing to me, is when I can shut that part of my critical thinking off and just enjoy the book. And luckily, I have found a few authors this year who have done that for me. That is the hunt. That is the point of reading for me, is to find those next authors that really spark that in me. And so when I recommend something as like a 5-star read, you can count on the fact that it went through a pretty rigorous evaluation process to get that rating. Like, it amazes me that anything works for me that well anymore. But yeah, I'm really nitpicky, and I think my average rating has gone down by at least a full point over the last couple of years. This was so much to film. I basically got to rant for 30 minutes and drag you along with me. So thank you for joining me. I can't be alone in all of these problems, but I want to know, like, what are the reading problems you have? What are the things that really bother you? Anything from my list, or is there something different that I didn't think of that really gets to you? I'd love to hear about it. These ramble posts end up being my favorite because of all the discussion that they generate. And I imagine that some of these things that I talked in here, if I don't already have a ramble post for it, I will be creating one over the next few months. Which, by the way, I will link all of the applicable ramble videos that I expand on some of these topics down below. Anyway, thanks so much for joining me, and I hope to catch you next time.